Welcome to the Coffee with Cheryl podcast, the podcast for women over 50 who want to live their best life right now. Imagine having the courage to reinvent your life financially, professionally, personally, and spiritually. Join Cheryl and guests as they share practical tips and resources to inspire you to achieve the lifestyle of your dreams. So grab your favorite mug. It's time for Coffee with Cheryl.
Welcome to the Coffee with Cheryl podcast, a podcast for women over 50 who want to live their best life right now. I am Cheryl Garrison, your host. I am a speaker, an author, a coach, and a champion for all things women over 50. My whole life is about helping you live your best life and do whatever it is that you want to do in your 50-something. I am so excited today to have with me Michell Sumrall. She is an author. She is a professional who works in human resources, and she is the CEO of Total Life Coaching, L.L.C. And you'll get to meet Michelle in just a few minutes. The one thing that we have in common, Michelle, is that I am the proud publisher of your book, Scattered, A Caregiver's Journey, right? And we'll talk about that too as well. But as always, before we get started, I want to share today a scripture that I believe talks about what we will be discussing today. And it's from Philippians 2 and 4. And I like to read them so that I make sure I get them correct. So Philippians 2 and 4. Let each of you look not only to his or her own interest, but also to the interest of others. And that is what Michelle has spent her life doing, helping others. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Glad to
Tell
be
us a little bit about who you are and what brought you here today.
Well, you brought me here today. So I'm Michell Sumrall. Professionally, I'm a human resources manager. I have wanted to be an author since I was 7 years old. Wanted to be a writer. That's what I knew it would be then. And it's taken me a minute, but in the 50s, I've gotten it done. I have one daughter and a teenager, and we have two dogs. We live in Georgia. She's a volleyball player, so I'm a volleyball mom. We love to travel and big readers around here. And we love Marvel movies, so superhero complex.
Oh gosh, that's fun. You would love my grandson. He is a not just Peter Parker, but Miles Morales fan. So both Superman, Spider-Man.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Michelle, show up first. I know you have a copy of your book. And when you sent me that book, the manuscript, and said, is this publishable? I think I told you at that time that I could not stop crying throughout the course of this book. And not just because of what and people tell people about the essence of your book, but not only what your parents were going through, but your response to it and how much love it took or it takes to do what you do to make sure they're cared for. So tell us a little bit about your book, and first of all, why you wrote it, and then a little bit about what's in it and how, if people are caregiving, how we can help them.
Sure. So Scattered, A Caregiver's Journey is really a reflection of the last 7-8 years of this journey that I've been on with my parents, from discovery of dementia and eventually Alzheimer's for my stepfather to figuring out what these odd behaviors were to now managing to live with it and still be able to kind of take care of them. Through it, the writing of it, and again, I mentioned I love to write, so I've always kind of jotted things down or journaled. But I discovered that wow, this is a lot of information, things that I'm finding out about caregiving And so as I would jot things down, I realized, wow, this is could be helpful to someone. During the journey, I would come across people and they'd just say, hey, I'm struggling right now, my mom or my dad or whatever. And so I'd be able to share a little bit about my journey and, tell people what I've learned so far. At that time, I've learned a lot more now. But as I was going through it, I realized, wow, this is a journey not just for me, but for a lot of people. And it may not be dementia, it may not be Alzheimer's, it may be, some other ailment, cancer, or some other disease. But caregiving is a work of the heart. You've got to love the people that you're caring for, and find time for yourself. I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
I keep me in the front.
Right. I know in the beginning of your book, when you talk about discovering that there was something not right, especially with your stepfather, talk about how, those who are listening and maybe wondering, is this something I should be concerned about with their elderly parents? What are some of the things that you noticed that caused you to look further into what was going on with him?
Right. So with him, it was really odd because for years, like, we would tease him about his driving. He's a retired Army, a veteran, and he just kind of was always pretty loose with driving. Maybe drove a little fast, but we started to notice swerving. And then thinking back, like, my mother stopped riding in the front seat; she would ride in the back seat. I guess because it made her nervous, but we thought nothing of that. But the catalyst for realizing that, wow, something's really going on with him, he started having hallucinations. Like, I didn't realize it at the time, but he was seeing things and seeing people that weren't there, or seeing two of the one person that was there. So he called me one day with just in fear. He said, I don't know what's going on. There are all these people in this house, and they're living here, and I just don't, I don't know who they are or why your mother's letting them stay. And I'm not at all like my mom. Like, you come, get your plate, and you got to go. So it was just really different, really odd. So that kind of sparked me to really look into it with him. We set him up to meet with a geriatrics doctor. And went ahead and scheduled the appointment for my mother too, because they're old. They're both getting up in age a bit. So that's, kind of what set it off with his just hallucinations, saying things that weren't there. He was a pretty quiet man, so he really didn't communicate a whole lot. He said what he needed to, and that was that. So it took a while to realize that, wow, okay, something's odd
going on. Wow. And I know during that time, you were starting to notice things with your mother as well. And while you were trying to find care for him, you start seeing things with her and realize this may be a double situation. Talk about that. I can't. Both my parents are gone, and they passed away pretty early in life, and so I never had the privilege, and I think it's a privilege, to be able to care for an elderly parent because of all that they did for us when we were, growing up. So I can't imagine the journey of watching this unfold and knowing that it's either let someone else handle it, or either you were going to have to do it yourself. So talk about just that whole journey of having both of them and knowing that you needed to find ways to care for them and also be able to care for your daughter and work your job and do all the other things that you were doing.
Right, yeah. So I lost a lot of sleep and a little bit of hair through the course of that journey. So with my mother, I think I really don't know when it started with her, because I think she was covering up for him for a long time, right? So I don't know how long ago or how long prior to me realizing that he's having issues that she realized. She thought he was lazy because he wasn't doing things around the house. So you think someone's lazy, we go to the doctor, we say they're not. But she wasn't grasping that. She was irrationally thinking that he was just lazy when clearly there was something going on. So that was a clue that I didn't pick up on. I talk to my mother every day, most of my life, at least a couple of times a day. It was a routine for me to call her on my way home from the office to lunch. And just, it was really quick, minute-long conversation. Hey, how are you all doing? And it was always pretty much the same thing. And so if I would stray from that and say, oh gosh, it's been a crazy morning or whatever, she kind of didn't have the normal response. Like we didn't have conversations anymore. It was always that same thing, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I'm on my way home from lunch or for lunch. Right. And, in the evening when I pick my daughter up, we'd call again and she'd say the same thing to my daughter. How's school going? And then I noticed that it would repeat. So she'd say, how's school going? And if we talked a few more minutes, she'd say, hey, how's school going? So it would start to repeat. So I started to notice those loops with her. But because we had set her up with a geriatrics appointment as well, that doctor identified, say, yeah, it's getting about that time. Let me send them to a neurologist. My stepfather was certainly farther along. So she sent us to a neurologist, and my mother was able to get in a study with that particular doctor to hopefully try some medication that may have helped. Which at the time I think it did kind of slow the progression for her. Physically, she's still thinks she can, run a marathon. You got to slow her down. But my stepfather progressed pretty quickly. As far as figuring out along the way what they needed, it was gradual. I thought my mother was still functioning well enough to take care of things around the house, or to at least say, hey, this needs to be done. Right. And I started to notice that was not the case. And so slowly I would found myself doing more things, paying the bills, just kind of making more visits, cleaning up a little bit, just doing some of the little things along the way. And when my stepfather had to go in the hospital with a UTI, and that's one thing that's pretty prominent with the elderly. So, and they cause a really bizarre behaviors. So I don't know if I talk about that much in the books, but they do. They cause a little bit more bizarre behavior. So he had really a really tough time with one and was hospitalized. So as he was coming home, someone had to be there 24/7. My mother was still in denial that he was sick. Right. Expecting him to do things that he wasn't doing. But so anyway, that kind of started the caregiving when he came home from the hospital. Right now, we do have 24/7 care for them in their home. It's expensive, so I recommend planning for that long-term care. Policies, it is unbelievably expensive, but if you want the best care, I would have had them move in with me, but I live 2 hours away and would have still had to have care because I have to work. Right, because you work, right. Like something. And you also have a teenage daughter. Right. Who's now going into high school, and you write a little bit about her reaction to what was going on, because having raised 3 kids myself, especially teenage girls, it's all about me. And so I know for her, it had to be a bit of a change of life for her. And how did she navigate through all that? Right. Well, she was right there with me for most of it, for most of the back and forths. She handled it really well. She's a bit spoiled. She's actually my only child, and she's their only grandchild. Okay. So, so that was, I know it was hard for her, especially with the loops of conversations and them not really grasping what it was that she was doing, because they would always show up for events and things like that. And they became less and less able to do that. So I know it was difficult for her, and she actually wanted to be represented in the book. And that's why her name and my name are the only two names in the book, actually.
Yes.
And I asked her, I said, well, do you want me to? She said, yeah, it's my story too. And it very much is. So, I mean, she gets it. She's really good with them. She's got some really good caregiving skills.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful for you.
But for her, she, dementia, I say dementia and Alzheimer's stole her grandparents, basically. They doted over her. Oh my gosh, spoiled. The things that child could do in their home, I would never dream of. So I went once, had dropped her off because I had to travel, and went to pick her up, and she's riding a bike in the house. I'm like, well, what is going on here? Oh, it's fine. I'm thinking of these people.
Well, that grandparent thing, I have three myself, and my daughter goes, how did they get away with this stuff?
Yes.
I don't have to raise them. All I have to do is love them. And,
yes.
And so that's how we are as grandparents. So, Michelle, one thing, later on, I want you to give some tips on how you navigated all this and some resources that you may want to share. But I want to talk about your coaching and how this experience led to you starting your own coaching business. And I know you have a background in psychology. You have a master's, right?
Correct.
So that was probably very helpful as you were going through trying to figure out what was going on in the family. So how did Total Life Coaching come about?
That's something I've wanted to do for a long time. I see that as my way to retirement from the corporate world, right? So I find myself, I coach daily in the, within my job, but just people I encounter. I'm an older mother than a lot of my daughter's friends. So a lot of her friends' parents, will come to me for with different questions, and I'm able to kind of direct and help guide them or just hear them. With this journey, I realized that I'm having a lot of conversations with people about caregiving and about what they may be going through with their parents. So that really kind of gave me the push that I needed to go ahead and start Total Life Coaching. Again, I'm not counseling right now. I have a Master of Science in Counseling Psychology, but I'm not counseling officially. I am, a certified life coach, and not to confuse that with, my professional life.
Right.
But what I've discovered is that I can certainly use it in my writing, and it took me a minute to snap and realize, wow, this stuff. Why weren't you able to discover this earlier? But once it snapped for me, once it clicked, I was able to. It's a different thing when it's your loved ones.
Right.
That's why
very, very much so.
Doctors shouldn't see their family members, and counselors probably shouldn't counsel their family members either. So, it all kind of clicked, and so I just realized that I can help people. I hope the book is doing that. I'm getting a lot of good feedback that it is. But if that's what my journey is supposed to be, then I'm ready.
That's wonderful. Well, for me, not having to deal with what you've dealt with, it was helpful with me in terms of, like, right now, my one of my sisters is ill, and just knowing the patience that it takes, and knowing to let people make some of their own decisions even though they're ill. I know in the book you talked about how you had thought it was better to put them in a facility. And that's just not what was good for them, and your mom was pretty vocal about that. And so you were able to transition them back home. So talk about that line between parent and daughter and caregiver for those ladies on the line who find themselves in the same situation. How do you be the mom to the mom? Parents to parents.
Exactly. And that's funny because she calls me her mom. My mother does a lot of times. She'll say,
Uh-huh.
Mom over there, and which is really sweet. She started doing that, some years ago, just kind of as a joke, but now
Uh-huh.
I think it's a little bit more real to her. Um, but that's a challenge, right? Because what I see when I look at my mother is my mother, this woman
Mhm.
who has reared me, who has corrected me, and I've got to stop her from putting too much salt on her food now, and she's like, I don't, this is my food, this is my plate, you worry about your plate. So it's a delicate balance. Another thing I consider too is I don't want my daughter to think that I'm being disrespectful
Mhm.
to my mother. So, I kind of do a lot of things jokingly with her. I'll make her chuckle while I'm correcting the behavior. So it's interesting kind of navigating those. My grandmother passed away when she was 101.
Ooh.
Yeah, and you could not tell her to do anything. She was quite tricky with some things, but as my grandmother, what am I? Who
Right.
am I
What do
to
you
tell
do?
her? It's like, oh boy,
Oh gosh. Well, based on your story and your book, it sounds as if you've been able to uh, successfully, and I know that word means different things, but been able to deal with what is going on with them and find the best way to make life better for them, for you, and for your daughter, which I believe is quite commendable. I really respect you for that. And as I was reading through your book, that's the word I would say stuck in my head was total respect for the way that you respected them. And for those of you ladies out there who find yourselves in the same situation, I doubly recommend that you purchase Michelle's book. And she's going to have a special for you at the end of the show. But she really gives you a lot of information on how to get through, not get through it, but how to deal with the things that come up when you are being a caregiver. One thing you talk about is self care, the importance of taking care of yourself. And as women over 50, without having to deal with these other things, we have to find ways to care for ourselves and take care of the things that we're going through. Right now, I have a rotator cuff,
oh no.
and so I'm dealing with that and working and doing all those things, but still trying to find the time to do the physical therapy and all that stuff. So talk a little bit about self care and how, as women over 50, we have to really think about how we do that.
Right. For me, I hit the wall. Like I had no choice but to stop. My body and my mind were so tired, just running back and forth. I travel quite a bit for work.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned I live 2 hours away from my parents, so if something happened, and I'm on the road, I'd have to swoop through, get my daughter, fix my house, go take care of whatever it was, get back in time to get her back in school or me back to work or whatever. Um, so I hit a wall. I mean, I wish I could say, oh, I thought all this stuff up and I just did it so brilliantly. I can't. I hit a wall. And many of us do because we put
Mm-hmm.
ourselves last. We put
Right.
ourselves after everybody else that we're taking care of. But you've got to take a break. You've got to, that wall is coming and it's hard. There were days I just did not want to get out of bed. And then there were days that I physically felt like if I step out of this bed, I am going to fall. Um, so I had to really pause and
Mm-hmm.
get the care that I needed from my doctors, and
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that I could still sustain. Because if something happened to me, I'm it from my household. I'm a single mom, and then almost a single parent to my parents. So
Right.
um, I really had to, I was forced to. Again, I wish I could just brilliantly say, oh, this is a formula. No, but I'm telling you, telling other women, don't
Right.
hit the wall. Stop down, meditate, pray,
Uh-huh.
take time for yourself. If you go away, take a getaway, whatever you need to refresh and renew, everything will still be there when you when you get back. So take that time. It is so crucial. It's so crucial.
It is. It is. And if you could give us just those ladies who, if you find yourself in that situation and you're struggling, trying to figure out what to do, how to care for your parents or a sick child or whoever you're entrusted to care for, Michelle, can you just give us a couple tips that the women can take away today? We know we need to take care of ourselves, but what are some other things that they can do right today that could possibly make their journey just a little easier?
Right. Yeah. Take your mental health seriously. We don't do that, especially African American
Hmm.
women. We put everything in the closet and we want to leave it there. We can't tell our stories, but sometimes our stories are what empower us. So definitely, take charge of your mental health, whether that's through prayer, through meditation, through taking a walk, which that walk is helpful for some cardiology and that weight and to stress and so there's so many benefits to just taking a walk or riding a bike or whatever.
Hmm.
um, but taking care of making sure that you have your business in order as well.
Hmm.
So excuse me, I take care of course my household, but as well as my parents, just managing their funds and what needs to be done and the caregiving staff that we have. um, so make sure that financially you're taking care of what you need to be taken
Hmm.
care of.
Hmm.
Get a will. Oh gosh, how many of us don't have wills? A lot. I don't know
Yeah.
why we don't take that step. It takes not a lot of time. There are local attorneys. There are will prep services online.
Right. Yes.
A lot of companies have will prep benefits, so take advantage of that stuff, as well as a lot of mental health benefits now
Hmm.
are starting to open up. So definitely take advantage of those things.
Hmm.
Um, a couple things that I learned during the course of taking care of my parents is that the utility companies, when I realized that my mother's not paying her bills, not because she couldn't, but because she wasn't thinking about it.
Right.
Um, if you go to them and say, "Hey, I've got this person's living here and they're disabled," or whatever the case may be, um, I prepared a letter for them with a note from the doctor that said, yeah, they have some legitimate concerns, so reach out to their daughter. So they won't turn off the power or
Oh,
turn off the water
yeah.
for the utilities, so that you can act on their behalf, as well as with their doctor. So
Mhm.
with all of my parents' doctors, if they need to have a conversation about their care, they call me.
Mhm.
So just kind of taking care legally what you need to. A power of attorney. Um,
Right.
yeah, so think about getting those things. Medical power of attorney as well, so you can make those decisions, the tough decisions surrounding their care. Assets. We don't think about assets, right? We know Big Mama's house has been Big Mama's house forever. But if you get to a situation where you have to move Big Mama into an assisted living
Mhm.
place, then either you pay private, which is fine, or they take assets. And
Mhm.
you don't want to lose Big Mama's house. So
Right. Right.
or do these things before they can't make those decisions
Decision.
anymore, right?
Right.
And so my parents never, they prepared really well, and they didn't push back on that. My mom actually was asking for it. She was like, yeah, you need to do this, take this, put this in your name, do whatever you need to do to take care of it. In my heart, feel like she knew something was coming.
Mhm.
I think she started to pick up on it. So, and she actually, for the writing of the book, held my hands, looked in my eyes, and said, "You do whatever you can do to help people." You do what you need to do.
Oh,
And so, that gave
beautiful.
me the peace to go ahead and write the book and share the story. So, but
And you
there's
have a chapter in the book on finances that gives some really good information for those of you when you buy her book on how to navigate the finances and the things that you need to do to make sure that you can properly take care of the business side of caregiving. Well, Michelle, you've given us a lot of good information, and it's just been wonderful sharing your story, sharing the journey of getting your book from your manuscript to the shelves. That was a pleasure for me to be able to be a part of that. And tell people where they can purchase Scattered online, or I know you did a book signing in a bookstore not too long ago, right?
Yes, absolutely. But it can be purchased online at michellsumrall.com. I am on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's also in Kindle format.
Mm-hmm.
So any of those resources can be
Okay.
used. And may I say just a little bit more?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for validating the book for me. I had one other friend read it just because I hadn't written in so long. But you were that first, in the industry read, and the feedback you gave just floored me. So thank you for that
Oh.
validation, carrying me through through this. At that point, I was so exhausted of writing and rewriting, and I was so exhausted. So you literally carried me through that process. So
Oh
I thank you
gosh.
so much for that.
Well, it was definitely a pleasure. We had some fun toward the end.
We did. It was great.
All things are fun,
Yes.
but I just we won't go into that. But it was definitely one of the highlights of my publishing career to be able to help get that book on the shelves. And I just highly recommend, even if you're not a caregiver right now, it just teaches you how to care for people, how to love, like the scripture says, let each of you look not only to your own interests, but to the interests of others. And in these days and times, if we can find ways to help other people, what a great world we definitely will have. And
Exactly.
so that book is more than just about caregiving. It's about taking care of each other and loving each other. And so I appreciate you for sharing your heart, sharing your story, and opening up your home and your parents' home to the world. That takes a lot of courage.
A lot of nerve.
So tell us, where can people purchase the book?
MichellSumrall.com is my
Okay.
webpage.
Okay.
It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and it is in Kindle format as well.
Okay, and I know you have a special for those who listen to the podcast and want to get the book. Tell us about that.
Yes, so the book sells for $19.99 on all the platforms that I mentioned. But if you purchase and mention that you were listening to the podcast or watching the podcast, it'll be on sale for $15.
And you can comment in the comments. You can email me at cherylgarrison7@gmail.com, or email Michelle at
MLSumrall2@me.com.
okay.
No,
And so I encourage you to get the book, read it, and if it is in you to share your story as well, for those of you who haven't heard me talk about our collaboration book coming up, if you're a woman over 50 and you want to just sort of delve into telling your story, connect with me to be part of our next Becoming 50 Something collaboration book. Telling your story is just freeing. It's one of those things that once you do it, it's healing. It changes you. So thank you, Michelle, for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
And we look forward to your next book because I know there's one still inside you to come out. And we're looking forward to that. And thank you, all the women who are watching today's podcast. Sometimes living our best life over 50 is about living our best life, helping others. So I'm hoping that you are doing that and that you will be that person that makes a difference in someone else's life. Thank you again, Michelle. And everybody have a great rest of your Monday.